Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight's Master of Ceremonies and Moderator, Salem Media Group Senior Vice President, Phil Boyce.
Hello, Philadelphia! You know, that wasn't loud enough. How about this? Eagles 25, Patriots 20. Now that gets a cheer. You're going to have to be louder than that when we introduce Mike Gallagher, or his feelings will get hurt. Welcome, attendees, ladies and gentlemen. As you all know, we are in precarious times in America. There is a culture war going on. And some liken it to a civil war, not with bullets and bloodshed, but a war of words and ideas. The left is a powerful opponent, and we won't beat them if we don't band together, get our information straight, be courageous, and be bold. So tonight is a special night because we are combining the battle to defend our faith and our freedom, and it seems like both do go hand in hand. I want to thank you for listening to AM 990, The Answer, and AM 560, WFIL. These stations, yes, give them an applause. These stations exist because of your support, and seeing you join us tonight for this event is special and encouraging to all of us. First, I want to thank our sponsors. This miraculous location, an out-of-the-world venue for extraordinary events, The Fuge. And let's thank Vidian Auto Group. Shop Vidian.com 24/7. That's right. Chapman Windows and Doors. Experience the Chapman difference. The difference is in the details. And Williamsburg Dental. Dentistry is our passion, service is our obsession, and painful dentistry too. I love that. And we also want to encourage, if you are a local business owner and you run a local business, to visit the table for the radio stations out back. There's a table back there that says Salem Surround, and I want you to stop by on your way out and say hi to them. Together with all of the fine folks, they partner with us for radio advertising, digital marketing, and event marketing. And just because I love shameless promotional plugs for cheers, once again, Eagles 25, Patriots 20. All right, so Mike Gallagher holds down the 9 a.m. to noon slot on the Salem Radio Network. Heard here on AM 990, The Answer, 9 to 11 a.m. Mike has radio in his blood, working his way up the radio ladder from Dayton, Ohio, to Greenville, South Carolina, to Albany, New York. And that's where the program director of the most listened to news talk radio station in the nation, WABC, found him, called him while he was on a cruise ship to offer him mornings on that station. That would be me making the call. He eventually grabbed a nationally syndicated radio show for the Salem Radio Network, where he was reunited with me and is now heard on over 430 affiliates, where he's also seen on the Salem News Channel. He is known as the Happy Conservative Warrior, wrote the book 50 Things Liberals Loves to Hate, and I am surrounded by idiots, and he's not talking about any of us tonight. Please welcome my friend, Mike Gallagher. Dennis Prager is a world-renowned scholar who holds down the noon to 3 slot on the Salem Radio Network right after Mike. Heard here on AM 990, The Answer, 1 to 3 p.m. Dennis grew up in Brooklyn, attended Brooklyn's Yeshiva High School, eventually becoming a college professor at Columbia before he realized how crazy those leftists over there can be. He's the only guy I know who learned to speak Russian so he could understand what they were saying on Pravda. He launched his radio career on KABC in Los Angeles before joining the Salem Radio Network, where he's heard on over 408 affiliates, plus the Salem News Channel. He is the founder and president of Prager U, where they teach what isn't taught in public schools and universities. He's now reaching over 1 billion downloads a year. He's written more than 20 bestsellers, including the Rational Bible series that is published by Regnery. Please welcome Dennis Prager. Dr. Robert Jeffress is senior pastor of the 16,000-member First Baptist Church in Dallas. Shortly after he arrived at First Baptist, he announced that he had plans to literally blow the church up, and that he did. But the church they built in its place is truly magnificent. He's also a Fox News contributor, an adjunct professor at Dallas Theological Seminary. Dr. Jeffress has made more than 4,000 guest appearances at various radio and television programs and regularly appears on major mainstream media outlets. He's the author of 30 books. Dr. Jeffress hosts a daily radio program, Pathway to Victory. It's heard on over 1,000 stations in major markets, including here in Philadelphia, on WFIL every morning at 9:30. He also hosts a daily television program, Pathway to Victory. You can watch that on TBN and also the Hillsong Channel. The television broadcast reaches 195 countries, is on 11,000 cable and satellite systems throughout the world. Please welcome Dr. Robert Jeffress. Tim Demoss is program director and brand manager for WFIL, Philadelphia's Christian radio, AM 560. His 35 years in radio have been primarily in the Christian music, teaching, and talk formats, as well as top 40 music. Demoss has covered the Phillies, the Eagles, the Flyers since 1997. The Tim Demoss Show, weekdays 4 to 5 p.m. on WFIL. Founded on John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. The program aims to walk alongside believers and encourage those who have not yet believed to consider putting their faith in him. Over 600 guests, local to international, in sports, film, TV, music, literature, and health, as well as faith and politics, have appeared on the show, including each of the members of tonight's panel. Please welcome Tim Demoss. Chris Stigall has been working listeners of Philadelphia's AM 990, The Answer, each morning with razor-sharp wit, pull-no-punches opinion, and captivating guest interviews since November of 2019. Weaving captivating interviews of newsmakers, politicians, entertainers, with his own brand of honesty and irreverence, you'll hear why he is called Philadelphia's Morning Answer. Chris's radio career has spanned nearly 20 years as a producer, writer, news anchor, DJ, talk show host. Chris is a frequent cable news guest, regularly conducts news-making interviews and commentary on his daily show. Chris and I got to know each other when he was on that other talk station. And we are delighted he's now on our team, Mr. Chris Stigall. A couple of years ago when I did one of these events for Philadelphia, Chris had not yet been hired to be our new morning man. And when I introduced him to the crowd, we got a standing ovation. And I said to the general manager, we better have signed this guy already because otherwise he's going to ask for a pay raise. And we have some certificates to present tonight, and Chris is going to do the honor.
We do. Phil, thank you so much. How's everybody tonight? You know, I listen to these brilliant guys introduced, and I just think to myself, I haven't done anything. How many books have you people written between you? That's embarrassing and humbling, and you're going to learn a lot tonight. I'm looking forward to it, but there are people that I want to thank tonight for helping make this event possible, and they are the people who sponsor our programs and our radio station. It's a three-legged stool. We talk about it all the time. We're grateful you listen. You know, we're there, we're talking, but if you're not there listening, and if we don't have sponsors that advertise with us, and if you don't in turn support those sponsors, it just simply doesn't work. And we are blessed to have some of the greatest sponsors in talk radio. And I'd like to first thank our venue sponsor, yet again, The Fuge, who has opened their doors to us so many times. You've heard their name for a long time, the good people at Vidian Auto Group. They have two locations, Newtown Square, as well as now Phoenixville, and they've been managed now by 3 generations at Vidian. Steve's son's Matt. They've been a proud advertiser on our station for many, many years. Vidian in Newtown Square is celebrating their 69th anniversary in November. Vidian, thank you so much for your long-time friendship. And Fast Eddie's got fantastic certificates for you guys up here, too, which you can collect at the end of the program or come up and receive now, whichever you choose. All right? If you've listened to the morning show with any regularity, you know about my friends at Chapman Windows, Doors, Siding, and Stucco Remediation out there in Westchester and in Wayne. They are here tonight, and I'm grateful because back in 1994, when Mike and Jim Redcliffe founded this family business, this is all they do. They are family owned and operated. Everybody that works for them works exclusively for them. They do outstanding work, and they jumped at the opportunity to be here with you tonight. They're set up in the back, so if you need anything exterior related done to your home, they're absolutely stellar at what they do. So I thank Mike and Jim and the team at Chapman for being here tonight. Now Lorenzo wants to embarrass you all by bringing you up. All right. So is there someone from the Fuge that would like to come up? Yeah. I feel like nobody's nominated someone from the group to come up, and now they're all arguing with one another about who should come up. Ladies and gentlemen, from the Fuge, it's Sam. Sam, thank you, my friend, so much. Glad you're here. From Vidian Auto Group. Oh, they're right here in the front row. I didn't know that. All right, in the front row from the Vidian Auto Group. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate you, sir. Thank you. Vidian. Someday we'll rehearse this certificate bit, and it'll go a lot smoother. This is the second time we've tried it and botched it both times. Chapman, Windows, Doors, and Siding. Where are you? There you go. My brother. I didn't even know you were here. This guy physically made the doors that went in Stately Stigall Manor. Physically did it. That's the guy, really. That's him. Thank you. Great to see you, man. And then finally, our final presenting sponsor tonight is, I didn't expect to get emotional about this guy, but when I came to Philadelphia and I didn't have a sponsor, I didn't know any of you, I didn't know this town, I didn't know anyone. And this was the very first sponsor that I ever had on a radio show, and he has stayed with me. He stayed with me for a move. He has become one of my dearest friends. I've watched his daughters grow up, and now his daughter practices alongside of him. You've probably heard the name Dr. Bob Spinato a few times over the years. Bob and his team at Williamsburg Dental in Broomall, right off the Blue Route, he did this. And so when people say, you've got a great smile, I always say, it's because of this guy. Dr. Geddes and his daughter Alexa are here in the front row. Guys, would you stand up? And Dr. Spinato, come on up.
Thank you, brother.
Best dentist in Philadelphia. How many of you are patients? Huh? How many of you? A few. And some of you who don't want to admit it because, frankly, you haven't seen him in 6 months and you know you should by now. Thank you, Bob. All right, Phil, on with the show. Thank you all very, very much.
Please support our sponsors because without them we would not be in business. I want to thank Lorenzo Caldera, the excellent general manager here in Philadelphia, for inviting me to come back to Philadelphia, back here to the Fuge, where I was a couple of years ago when we did the Battleground Talkers tour right here in this location, and I loved it so much. I loved you guys and the fans that we have here on these stations that I'm happy to come back. During the last 10 years, Salem has become a juggernaut in conservative media. It's not just me saying that, but the New York Times actually said that, so it must be true. They're right, all the time, right? I manage the best and brightest host in the planet, folks like Hugh Hewitt, Mike Gallagher, Dennis Prager, Charlie Kirk, Sebastian Gorka, Brandon Tatum, and Eric Metaxas. Yes, you can applaud for those names. And we're thrilled to have two of them right here on our panel tonight. I'm going to ask our panelists some pointed questions. Any of them who want to jump into the fray, just raise your hand and join in, and that'll be fine. And by the way, can you hear me okay? Because there's a little echo in here. Should I switch to a handheld mic? Would that be better?
No, the issue is the speakers face outward, so it's always tough on stage.
Okay.
It is what
yeah,
it is.
okay. All right, but you guys can hear me, right? And let's try this. Is this better? Wow.
Handheld is always better.
All right, I'll use this.
Okay.
So, Mike, I wanted to start tonight with the 800-pound gorilla in the room. No, not you. You probably lost 800 pounds, but you're not the 800-pound gorilla. Not just me saying that, but it seems like everything we talk about with this presidential campaign involves Donald Trump, one way or another. The left hates this man, which makes us love him more. They impeached him 2 times and indicted him 4 times, and yet every poll I see, they're only making him stronger. Will this strategy on the left of throwing everything at this man, including the kitchen sink, succeed or fail? Mike Gallagher and then Dennis Prager.
My prayer is that the left doesn't figure it out, that they're too dumb to figure it out, that it's whatever they're trying isn't really working. I want you to know that I sort of talked my way into this event because I'm so honored to be part of a discussion about faith and freedom, and this because we're in the middle of a spiritual war. This is a cultural war. All of us talk about it, I think, on our shows on a daily basis. And I want to address Phil's question about the 2024 presidential race, but I also want to reiterate what the stakes are. Today I had a chance to interview a guy that everybody knows, probably the most famous pillow salesman in the history of pillows, the great Mike Lindell. Now, Mike is a warrior who didn't know anything about politics a number of years ago. He went on a trip to Israel, and he was with one of the Salem hosts who Phil hired and mentored, a guy named Kevin McCullough. And Kevin explained to Mike the difference between a Democrat and a Republican. He explained the difference between a conservative and a liberal. Mike didn't know. Mike owned a bar in Minnesota. And Mike's story is such a powerful one because it's one of redemption and one of, turning to God, turning it all over to God. And he had a dream that he'd meet President Trump one day. Not only did he meet President Trump, they became fast friends, believe it or not. He belongs to Mar-a-Lago now. And as a result of his belief that our elections have been tainted, as a result of Mike's conviction that elections need to be better in this country, they've come after him with the heat of 1,000 suns. They've done everything they can to put him out of business, to shut him down. And this is a really good and decent man. This is a guy whose company in Minnesota employs a lot of people who had lost everything too. Felons, people who thought they were done with life. And he gave them another chance because he believes in God's love and grace and redemption. And I asked Mike today it's true, because it matters. It matters. And Mike, as you know, never appears anywhere without wearing a cross around his neck. He believes that he wants the world to know about the love and the joy of redemption, of being saved, about being a believer. And I asked him today, what sustains you through all that comes at you? Because they're trying to shut him down. The big box stores have kicked him out. He said, it's my love of the Lord. It's my love of God. It's my faith. My faith sustains me. If all of us, Christians, Jews, all of us can turn to God, we'll get through the darkest time. Well, we're in a dark time right now. We're witnessing the government weaponized in order to try to put the 45th president of the United States behind bars. No one believes that all of a sudden, 2.5, 3 years after he left office, he suddenly found 91 counts, criminal counts to charge him with, all at once. Nobody believes that. They have tried everything they can to stop him from returning to the White House. I was sharing with Dennis and the group in the green room. There's a pretty notorious never-Trumper who I correspond with. He hates Trump, despises him. He admitted to me last week, he said, Mike, it pains me to say this, but the way the Democrats are imploding with Grandpa Joe at the helm, the way the Democrats don't know what to do, I think your guy is not only going to get nominated, he's going to get the nomination, he's going to win the presidency. So we'll see, but at the end of the day, all of us know what's at stake. The country's at stake, freedom to worship is at stake, and most of all, the freedom to express ourselves the way we Americans should be allowed to express ourselves is at stake. We should be allowed to question the outcome of an election. Goodness knows the Democrats did in 2016. We should be allowed to question the efficacy of a vaccine. We should be allowed to question lockdowns and mandatory mask wearing. We should have a right to question all of that because that's the America that we know and love.
And Mike, that explains why you're not on YouTube.
What's that?
That explains why you're not on YouTube.
I guess.
You just said the big three things that'll get you kicked off YouTube.
Right away. They'll shut you down.
And Dennis, you have that honor of already being kicked off YouTube.
Sorry?
You have the honor of being kicked off YouTube already.
Oh yeah, well, don't start me on that one. So let me answer everything that Mike said I assent to. I just want to state it in ways that I perceive the issue. I am infinitely more preoccupied with destroying the left than with Donald Trump. This is not I want to make something clear about Donald Trump. Number one, I thought he was the best president since Abraham Lincoln. But I'm not preoccupied with him. I am as alienated from only Trump as I am from never Trump. I don't agree with either position. I have an only destroy the left, because the left is destroying America. And by the way, I always make a distinction between left and liberal. Liberals don't hold almost any left-wing values. The tragedy of America is that liberals vote left-wing values, not liberal values. If liberals voted their values, they would vote Republican. That is the irony, and none of your liberal relatives understand that. They still think they're voting for the party of John F. Kennedy and Harry Truman and the like. They're sweet fools. Liberals are sweet, foolish people. Not in every arena. They may be wonderful parents, wonderful friends, and a whole host of things. But when it comes to the future of America, they, more than the left, are wrecking it because they're voting for the left, which is wrecking it. So I learned something in that regard. I learned it ironically from Minnesota. There's a phrase in Minnesota called Minnesota nice, because there are a lot of nice people in Minnesota. And the nice people of Minnesota vote despicable people into office. The ability of nice people to do terrible things is legion. That's why I'm not interested in nice people. I'm interested in wise people. Wisdom is the key to goodness, not good intentions. And now allow me a joke. A woman came over earlier during the meet and greet earlier, and she was wearing a t-shirt that said, "I love my church." I am a Jew, and my immediate reaction was, I have never seen a Jew wear a t-shirt, "I love my synagogue." And I will tell you a joke to prove my point. A Jew is on an island, stranded after a shipwreck. Finally, after 2 years, he is found. And they find him and 2 synagogues. And they go, "Why are there 2 synagogues? There's only one of you." And he said, "This is the one I attend, and this is the one I would never set foot in."
Love it. Thank you, Dennis. Dr. J, you have a comment?
You know, the question you asked Mike about 2024 and the theme of tonight, religious liberty, let me just say this. A couple of weeks ago, the Associated Press asked me the question I've been asked 1,000 times in the last 8 years, and that is, how can evangelicals support such an immoral man like Donald Trump? And I said, it's easy. Evangelicals are smart enough to know they're not electing a pastor, they're electing a president. And there's a big difference between the two. And I said, Christians, above all, understand that there is an existential war going on in our country between good and evil. And we want a warrior like Donald Trump who can win that war. And that's why Christians are supporting him and continue to support him. Interestingly, that was not long ago. A few days later, I got a text at 2:31 in the morning from Donald Trump saying, "This is so true, Robert. The left and the Marxists want to destroy Christianity, but I will not allow it to happen." And you say, well, how do you know he's going to do what he says? Because he did it the first 4 years he was in office. No president did more for religious liberty in America, and I'm including Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush. No president did more for religious liberty in America than Donald J. Trump. And I think that's why evangelicals continue to support him.
Yeah, but in order for Donald Trump to fulfill that promise, he's got to be elected. And that's what we're here for tonight, to make sure that happens. And by the way, Dr. Jeffress, I'm so delighted that you're here tonight, because this is a faith and freedom event. It seems like everything you do ties those two things together. You understand that this country was founded on faith, and yet there's a battle raging in America to destroy those roots and take God out of our culture, out of our very lives. Christians are under attack like never before. The culture war is threatening to tear us apart. Help us understand how this has happened in America and what we must do to save our country and what we believe in.
Well, America was founded on the Judeo-Christian faith. There is absolutely no debate about it. And I can give you quote after quote. John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, God has given us in this Christian nation the privilege of choosing our leaders. Murphy versus Ramsey, 1865, the Supreme Court, this is a Christian country. There is no doubt we were founded on the precepts of the Judeo-Christian faith. But about 50 years ago, some numbskulls got the idea, well, maybe we don't need faith. We don't need God to be good. We can be good without God. And so you had this rabid attempt to remove every display of God, 10 Commandments, Bible reading, prayer in schools, and the result has been catastrophic. You know, as Dostoevsky said, without God, all things are permissible. Why shouldn't I shoot my fellow classmate? Well, who says that's wrong? If there is no God, there is no standard by which to judge right and wrong. And so I think we're in the position we are because we have forsaken God. We have said, we're not going to post "thou shalt not kill" in the 10 Commandments in schools anymore. Well, Why is gun violence up? Because we don't teach people. God says it's wrong to kill one another. I've just written a new book on the 10 Commandments called The 10. The fact is, ever since we've tried to uncouple ourselves from God's law, the result has been a disaster for our country. Phil, I've noticed 2 interesting polls that came out, studies, and they were both on Drudge on the same day. One was church attendance at an all-time low. Right underneath that was a study about mental disorders and emotional disorders, loneliness, anxiety, fear at an all-time high. Do you think there might be a relationship between the two? I think there is. And you know, God said through the prophet Hosea, Dennis, you know it well, in Hosea 4, because you have forgotten my law, I will forget your children. And I think we're seeing that happen in our country. And I'm not trying to make anybody into a Republican or a Trump supporter, but I do believe we all need to follow God. He has the only answer to what ails our nation.
Love it. Tim Demoss, you have done it all on radio, most of it right here in Philadelphia. When you started your show in the afternoon, you're on 4 o'clock on WFIL, you decided to make your theme John 3:16. Why did you do that, and have you been able to stay true to that?
Yeah, it's quite a thing to be able to do this format in Philly. I went to a Christian school my whole life. Is this okay? Or should I do the...
We can hear you.
You okay? Sure. I went to a Christian school my whole life, and then I went to Penn State for squeezed 4 years into 6. Wanted the ability to practice even more so. And my eyes try to view the world that way. So this show specifically, the way I describe the program, someone has said, my goal is the program is to help people. I don't want to have a show just to have a show, because that's going to come and go, and then whatever happens. There are other shows and other places you can get content and entertainment and encouragement, whatever. But I want the show to help people, and the best way I can help people, I believe, is by pointing them to Christ, John 3:16. Because as long as you're breathing, you have an opportunity to take advantage of what is said. I have worked in radio a long time where this is actually very unusual. Most Christian stations are afraid to go beyond guest-wise, for example. So my guests, actually everyone on the stage has been on the show at one point or another. Had a wonderful conversation with Dennis Prager a few years ago when No Safe Spaces came out. A great documentary, walked it through. I have the notes in my pocket here, and learned a lot from talking with him. And I'll have guests on from other walks of life. I mentioned to some listeners tonight, Jackie Chan's filmmaker was on talking about how to make a film. Bryce Harper's bat maker from King of Prussia. And just interesting things about their craft. So the show is, the top level is how can I help someone know Christ? But there are other ways, because I know some people won't go that direction. But maybe they want to have a conversation. And then maybe I can just help you by having a show that encourages you, gives you a laugh, something, give you a prize, something like that. So I have found it to be very well received because people know I'm not judging anybody, but I have a very solid framework. The gospel is very clear to me. I'm not trying to water it down or create a fuzzy show. And also to pick and choose. Some guests I don't have on because it's maybe better suited for off stage. But I have found that even some really good conversations come from, I remember I had Mira Sorvino on, the actress Mira Sorvino, who was in a Woody Allen film, won an Academy Award. And she was in a film recently called, it's about prayer, but it was done kind of generically. It's one of those Hallmarky kind of things. Anyway, she's a mom, and she has a child in the film who the film starts off where they are in church, and the pastor's saying you can talk directly to God. And this little girl's looking at the pastor like, wow. And all the people in church are asleep. And over the course of the film, she takes the pastor at this word, I can actually talk to God directly. The mom, Mira Sorvino, is kind of like, that's nice, daughter. Whenever she's saying, oh, Mom, I answered this prayer got answered. And anyhow, the point is, when I interviewed Mira, who I don't know where she's coming from, she was on the show to promote the film, which was positive enough. I asked her, when you work on a film for 4 months, did you come away different? Like you put yourself in their shoes. You go to work every day, you're talking about God and faith and prayer and all that. And she paused and she said, I wish I could be more like that little girl. Because she had a simple faith. And when you get older, you get complicated. And it was just a lot. And so I haven't had a chance to have her on again, but I would love, one of the reasons for the program, just to wrap up, is the idea of having a show where you can have a conversation like that maybe you plant a seed and it leads to more conversations later. Other days, Dr. Jeffress calls in and he knows how to lay it down real quick and he's got it all straight. And other day, Chris was on the show today talking about tonight, having some fun.
Sorry about that.
No, that was great. So yeah, it's a real pleasure to be able to do it. I love it, and I welcome people to listen in.
Thank you,
I hope
Jim.
that's helpful.
Thank you. Chris Stigall, you are a survivor, you are a warrior, and you understand this talk radio game as well as anybody. I want to ask you something. Tonight I'm a little concerned that the left's hidden agenda is to kill talk radio. And I want to tell you why I think that. Earlier this year, I was interviewed on a documentary about talk radio by NPR called The Divided Dial, and they asked me, do you think it is legal for your host to publicize election denial lies? They actually believe it should be illegal for you hosts to make any such claims, which tells me the left wants to get rid of the First Amendment, which protects speech they disagree with. Do you think they're coming for the First Amendment? And do you think they're coming for talk radio?
Sure. I will just say this, that I have worked for a couple of different companies now, and I can tell you with authority, and I know these gentlemen will attest to this, there is but one broadcast company left, in my estimation, of the bigs that do this, that is unafraid, that doesn't tell us not to talk about the election, that doesn't tell us not to talk about our faith, that doesn't tell us not to talk about January 6th. And that's the people that are responsible for us being here tonight. That's Salem, the Salem Media Group. They are, and I mean that. I know this because I have worked, and I work with colleagues who have worked for other broadcast companies. The January 6th topic was one where corporate folks called the hosts up and said, stop it. Stop discussing it. Stop it right now. It's over. Drop it. COVID, masks, shots. Don't question it. Shut up. Stop talking about it. So I would say that sadly, a lot of folks that own corporate talk radio today are helping, sadly. I'm thrilled and delighted that Salem is not one of those. But I would just say broadly, no. Does it surprise me they're coming after the First Amendment? No. Just today, here it is, 9/11 today, and I was kind of considering that we often talk about 9/11 was an attack on the principles of the country, an attack on all of us. And 22 years ago, when I was new to this, I shared that, and I thought all Americans shared that point of view. 22 years later, I realized that we don't need 19 Saudis to undermine and attack the fiber and the fabric of the country. Some of our friends and neighbors are engaged in it right now here at home. And it's sad. It's sad and it's alarming, but it's true. You hear the governor of New Jersey say, I wasn't thinking about the Bill of Rights. That's beyond my pay grade, when he shut down churches and businesses. You hear the governor of New Mexico say, well, it's an emergency. We've got to take your guns. It's an emergency. These people are entirely comfortable with taking away our natural rights, our God-given rights. And why doesn't the country at large, not us, present company excluded, but why don't so many people in this country, why aren't they alarmed at the government colluding with media to silence speech? Why aren't they alarmed when a governor says no more guns? Why aren't they alarmed when a governor says we got to close the church or the business because it's an emergency? I have come to the conclusion, as Dr. Jeffress just said, it starts in our schools. Our public schools have been hijacked. Our public schools have been hijacked, and generations of kids, and I mean no disrespect to those of you who are educators and have done it well. My mother was one for 30 years. My wife was too. So I don't mean to besmirch everyone in public education, but my wife and I are now committed to introducing to people who haven't considered it before a new way forward to educate your kids, whether it's homeschool, whether it's private school, charter school, Christian education. We have to drain the swamp of public education in order to teach children about our natural rights. We have to.
Love it. And that leads me to my next question for Dennis Prager. And Dennis, I've always wondered this. In 2009, you saw this coming, and you created something called PragerU. And today, yeah, that deserves applause. And with these little short 5-minute videos, you're doing more to educate the nation's young people than the entire public education system. Recently in Oklahoma, they adopted PragerU videos for their curriculum. More states should do that. But I just want to hear from you. How did you see this coming, and how did you recognize that PragerU could fill the void?
Well, I'm getting a lot of credit that I don't deserve. In one sense, I deserve more credit, and in one, I deserve less. I saw it coming in the 1990s. I wrote at the time, for example, that the obliteration of the distinction between male and female will lead to the end of Western civilization. I wrote it, so it's in print. This is not Monday morning reporting, Monday morning quarterback reporting. But I didn't come up with the idea of PragerU. Alan Estrin, the producer of my radio show, did on a listener cruise on the Indian Ocean. He walked over to me and he said, "We need to start a Prager University to get your ideas out to more people." Had it been anyone else on earth, I would have laughed, but Alan Estrin has never told a joke in his life. Therefore, I knew he was serious. I didn't know exactly what it meant, but I gradually learned. Let me give you an idea of how bad it is. Just today, I reported, because it just came out. This was in the Daily Mail and some other places, and ironically, in Oklahoma, arguably the most conservative state in the union. An elementary school, ironically, named the John Glenn School, has just appointed its new principal, a drag queen. The principal of an Oklahoma public school for elementary school is a drag queen. It is a man who dresses in women's clothing all the time, and not subtly. And when you realize that, you realize that the left is a purely destructive force. There is no good involved in having that. To have kids see as their principal, Phil mentioned I went to a yeshiva school. That's a religious Jewish school till I was 19, half the day in Hebrew, half the day secular subjects in English, a very grounded education. When my principal walked into our classroom, we stood up. I was taught to venerate teachers, but everything that I was taught to venerate is being destroyed. Most teachers in the United States stink. I can't tell you how difficult it is for me to say that. In the Jewish tradition, a parent and a teacher are virtually on the same level. That is how highly they are regarded. That the left has corrupted one of the most noble professions the human race has ever created is it a perfect example that anything that the left touches, it destroys. That teachers support this, that teachers' unions, the head of well, this is not a teachers' union, the head of the American Library Association now identifies herself as a lesbian Marxist. You have to understand that any government that has ever implemented Marxism has turned out to engage in genocide. There is no exception. Marxism means mass murder. There is no exception. A Marxist regime murders en masse, tortures en masse, deprives human beings of elementary dignity. And the head of the American Library Association calls herself a Marxist. To give you an idea how effective the left is in destroying whatever it touches, I have had to rethink one of the deepest understandings I have had of the female human being. Until recently, and I'm not a young man, I believed, in other words, all of my life that it was a given that it is in women's nature to protect children's innocence. It's built into females to protect children's sexual innocence. The destroyers of children's innocence in America today are overwhelmingly females. Overwhelmingly, like in the 80% bracket. They are the kindergarten teachers, they are the elementary school teachers, they are the librarians, they are the principals. How did that happen? How did women become the most active destroyers of children's innocence in Western history? How did that happen? It shows you the power of the left and the power, the ease with which people's minds can be perverted. It's very distressing. So when you say, yes, I did, I saw it coming, I beg people, more than having your kid even watch a PragerU video, I beg you to have your child homeschooled. Take your child out of school. Take your child out of school. And you know why people don't? I'll tell you why people don't. People don't think bad things will happen to them. They think they're immune from having their child come home and having contempt for you, their mother, or you, their father. They think they're immune. You are a fool if you think you're immune. Virtually every conservative / Christian or not Christian, or Jew or secularist, virtually everyone in this country who has more than 2 children has one who hates their guts because they're conservative. Hates their guts. They have lost their child to the education system which teaches them to have contempt for their mother and their father. I'll tell you what, I'll prove it to you. I don't know you. I'd like you to raise your hand. I want the people up here to see this. Okay, I may be proven wrong. By the way, I hope I am. So I want you to raise your hand. Wait till I finish what I'm asking. And if you know any family, so you don't have to be self-conscious if it's your family, because we're not aware whether it's your family or another, where there is an adult child who does not speak to a parent, raise your hands. Keep them up, please. Keep them up. Oh yeah, I should raise my hand too. It's not my family. Okay, so what would you say? Almost a half? Okay, more than a half. And this is a conservative audience, right? And so who presumably raise their children with their values. And in most cases, it's because of philosophy of life and morality, not because they have some horrible rift because the parent beat them up when they were a child. It's because the parent had the audacity to vote Republican, or even worse, vote for Trump. Does anybody know a child who doesn't speak to a parent because they voted for Joe Biden? I wonder if there's one in the United States of America. If my parents had voted, they're not alive, obviously, but if they had voted for Joe Biden, I would have thought it was a riot. And then I would have come home and visited. How you doing, Ma? You still think it was a good idea to vote for Biden? And that would have been it. People think it's not going to happen to them. How many people, I'll end with this, send their kids to Penn, just to give a local cesspool. And the kid went a decent, nice, respectful, warm, happy child, and came home a bitter ingrate. You get a BA in ingratitude, at an American university, you get a master's in ingratitude, and then you get a PhD in ingratitude. And every ingrate is a miserable person. That's our education system in a nutshell.
Thank you, Dennis. And you're too humble, but I still thank you for PragerU. Or maybe I should thank Alan Estrin for PragerU.
That's right. You tell him. You tell him, Phil.
So, Mike, I want to ask you a question here. One of the battle cries of the left over the last few years was to defund the police. Same communities listened, some communities, I should say, listened, foolishly followed that advice. Today we have Soros-backed prosecutors, including one here in Philly, refusing to charge violent criminals. Police officers have lost resources, lost officers, become demoralized. Meanwhile, crime has skyrocketed here in Philly and across the country. How important is it for us to stand up for the police, fund the police, and attempt to stop this crazy left-wing ideology that has caused this disaster?
Is there anything more gratifying than seeing a Democrat politician who voted to defund the police become a crime victim and then suddenly want the police at their doorstep? It just happened again this week. You lose count of all the times that a Democrat who wanted to defund the police realizes they needed one, and they're shocked. Look at what's happening around the country with these Soros-installed prosecutors. One of the most evil and brilliant things the left came up with was a billionaire named Soros who would fund the campaigns of these nobodies, these little-known radical far-left whack jobs, who became prosecutors. They became district attorneys and state attorneys, and they became prosecutors who refused to prosecute crimes under the guise of social justice. That's always the caveat. I use Larry Krasner as an example on a regular basis, but I also use the example of your mayor. This mayor who was caught on video dancing the happy dance when a judge ruled in favor of Philadelphia becoming a sanctuary city. Dancing, I mean, listen, all of us look pretty silly dancing a happy dance. He looked sillier than all of us put together. And yet, that's their heart. They don't want borders. They don't want rule of law. They don't want law and order. And now, how's that sanctuary city status working for you, Philly? How's it work in New York City? How's it working in Los Angeles? I got on the train today from New York, where I've been for the last week or two. I live there part-time. And it's glorious to watch Upper West Side liberals losing their minds over the illegal crisis that they have in the city of New York. They're shocked that when you say, come on in, because we're a sanctuary city, well, they come in and they rob and they rape and they maim and they litter and they pollute. You know, Trump had it right 7 years ago. He never called all Mexicans rapists. He never said, he didn't disparage Hispanics. He disparaged the bad people who come across the border to wreak havoc in America's cities. Well, guess what? The chickens have now come home to roost. And now they don't know what to do. Now even those shrews on The View have to sit around and say, we think we got to relocate the migrants out of New York. Not in our backyard. Not in our backyard. And that doesn't seem like a very compassionate thing for liberals to do after declaring sanctuary city. Years ago, I visited one of my affiliates in South Bend, Indiana, and I had learned about a young sergeant who had been shot dead during a drug raid. And I was told that he was a big fan of the show, and his wife was a big listener, and I asked if I could visit her. And she had 3 little kids. And this grieving widow was so kind and so full of love. And as I sat and spent a couple of hours visiting with her, I learned that one of the immediate needs that she had was to try to figure out how to pay some bills, how to get the kids clothes for the funeral, what they were going to do. And at that moment, I came up with the idea of Gallagher's Heroes, the Fallen Officer Fund. And for the last 15, 16 years or so, we've been raising funds for the families of police officers who've been killed in the line of duty. But even more glorious than getting to send a check to a grieving family is how we've expanded the First Responders Bible. We can't even comprehend what first responders witness when they go to a scene. We read about it in the news, we hear about it on the radio, we see it on TV, a mass shooting, a slaughter, a rape, a child murdered. The first responders see that and have to carry that in their hearts and then go back to work the next day. So we developed something called the First Responders Bible, which is a King James Bible with a spiritual fitness manual in the back. And it helps we have distributed thousands and thousands of these first responder Bibles. And Philadelphia is so near and dear to my heart because for anybody who knows the Union League in Philly, you know the names Jack and Pina Templeton. And Dr. Jack Templeton and Dr. Pina Templeton were our angel donors. They didn't want anybody to know about it. They were very low-key about it, but they funded our foundation for many, many years. Now, Jack and Pina are with the Lord, and they're watching over us and guiding us through Gallagher's Heroes, the Fallen Officer Fund, and the First Responders Bible. It infuriates me to see the hatred that the left exhibits toward law enforcement. It destroys me to watch a governor of New Mexico brag about taking away the right to keep and bear arms because an 11-year-old child was killed in a road rage incident. And what Chris was talking about, what Chris alluded to, is absolutely true. An 11-year-old was killed in a road rage incident, and as a result, the governor of New Mexico has declared an emergency and said that you're not allowed to carry your weapon, your licensed firearm, for a beginning point of 30 days. They think nothing of shredding the Constitution. They think nothing of taking away your constitutional right to keep and bear arms. I mean, they're through shredding the First Amendment. Now they're working on the Second Amendment. And they're going to go down the list until they try to muzzle every single American. But I kept thinking about this governor of New Mexico. I guarantee you she is well protected by brave men and women of law enforcement who have to protect her and her family. She wouldn't want those law enforcement officers to be stripped of their weapons because, you see, the governor gets to be protected, but you're not allowed to protect yourself. You're not allowed to defend yourself. There is no braver or more honorable profession than a first responder, than men and women of law enforcement, of course. Men and women who put on a gun and pin a badge on every day and pray that this is the day that they'll get through, and the firefighters who walk into a burning building and risk their lives. And on this day, 9/11, 22 years ago, I was sitting in the Empire State Building that morning broadcasting my show. And we saw it all firsthand. And I lost in the town that I lived, Manhasset, Long Island, 67 people in our little town. We watched the funerals go by for weeks and months. This morning I played something on the show called Silent Night, a tribute to those who lost their lives, and remember that God is with all of us in our darkest time. The phrase in that image that we played was that I will be with you in the stairwell of your darkest hour. And as those buildings fell down, God is all around us. And so even in our darkest times, may we remember those brave men and women, those in the military, those who fought and died, and certainly our first responders. That's a huge difference between the right and the left. We honor law enforcement. We honor first responders. We know they're the real heroes. The left has it wrong on that because, as Dennis says, everything the left touches turns to crap. Everything the left touches. I wrote a book a few years ago called 50 Things Liberals Love to Hate. And it kind of expands upon Dennis's belief that everything the left touches, they destroy. The left hates everything we love. Think about it. Flag pins, American flag lapel pins, police officers. I mean, go down the list. Parental rights and parental involvement in their child's education. They hate all of those things. And so it's up to us to get off the sidelines and be warriors. We cannot sit on the sidelines anymore. And if there's anything that you can take away from this great evening, I hope you take away the message that we can't just talk about it anymore. We can't just phone talk shows, we got to be engaged. You got to knock on doors. You got to hand out flyers. You got to get involved in your local Republican precinct. You got to fight the good fight, like I like to say, because if not, we're going to lose the country forever.
Thank you, Mike. Dr. Jeffress, you and I were together in June in Orlando, my home away from home, at the NRB, doing a panel on Christian nationalism, a topic that you suggested, and you got us in trouble because a lot of people didn't like us talking about it. But let me explain to this crowd what Christian nationalism is. That's the belief that the church needs to stand up for America. Others believe, perhaps, that the church should stay neutral in the culture wars, just preach the gospel. But throughout time, when the culture abandons God and religion, it has been the church that has stood up for God and country and led the way in saving not just souls, but the nation as well. So, Dr. Jeffress, explain your belief here that the church has to get involved, and in your case, stay involved.
Well, I'm accused all the time of being a Christian nationalist, and I think that is a made-up term. Now, if by Christian nationalist you mean that I love America more than I love God, of course not. If you mean given a choice of following our country's leaders or following God, no, I'm not saying that at all. But if by Christian nationalist you mean that Christians are free and have a responsibility to vote their convictions, you mean Christians who believe that abortion is murder, you mean Christians who believe that faith in Jesus Christ is the only way to heaven, will count me in. I'm a Christian nationalist. I'm very clear. God doesn't get goosebumps when he hears the Star-Spangled Banner. He doesn't stand up and salute when he sees the American flag. The Bible says God is no respecter of people or nations. Any nation that honors God will be blessed by God. And any nation, including the United States, that rejects God will be rejected by God. And that's why the psalmist said, Psalm 33:12, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." I think Christians have a responsibility, though, to vote their convictions. I believe that with all of my heart. And, as you said, Phil, it's not the government. The government is not going to bring about some great reform that leads to utopia or the millennium or the rule of Christ. God created government. A lot of people forget this. God created three institutions. He created the home first, then he created the government, Genesis chapter 9, and then he created the church in Acts chapter 2. Each of those institutions has a distinct responsibility. Government's responsibility was to maintain order in society and protect people from evil. Romans 13. That's why, by the way, borders are something God instituted. Acts 17 said God created the nations and boundaries we're to live in. To protect the borders is something that God told us to do. That is a part of God's plan. But that's all government can do, protect its citizens and keep us secure. In 1 Timothy 2, Paul said, pray for kings and all those in authority that we might live quiet and tranquil lives with all dignity. You know what he was praying? He was praying, Lord, just have the government leave me alone and allow me to practice my faith. That's all we can hope for government to do. Government can't change a person's heart. Only the gospel of Jesus Christ can do that. And that's why the church has the most important mission in the world, not to turn everybody into Americans or Republicans. The mission of the gospel is to share the gospel of Jesus Christ because he is the only hope for this world. And the fact is, Jesus is coming back again. I told the story recently on a TV show about a group of seminary students who were playing basketball, and the old janitor was in the bleachers waiting for them to finish so that he could lock up, and he was reading his Bible. And on the way out, one of the seminary students looked at the janitor and said, "What are you reading?" He said, "Oh, I'm reading the book of Revelation." And the young theological student, in a condescending way, said, "The book of Revelation, do you understand what you're reading?" The janitor said, "I sure do. It says Jesus is going to win." And that's the hope we have. Jesus is coming back to reward the righteous, to punish the unrighteous. There is a new world coming, free of earthquakes and murders and vandalism and drugs and every other ill we can think of. But until that time, we as the Church of Jesus Christ need to push back against evil. That's what Jesus meant when he said, "You're the salt of the earth. You're a preservative in this society. You're not going to prevent evil, but you can slow it down. You're to be salt, but you're to be light. You're the light of the world." We're to be sharing the gospel of Jesus with as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, because he alone is our hope.
Wow, powerful. I wish I lived in Dallas and I could sit on the front pew of your fine church there and listen to that kind of sermon. We're in the last 20 minutes. I don't know if you can believe it, but we're running out of time. So I'm going to ask some lightning round questions. And feel free to answer it the best way that you can. But let's talk about this, because this is a faith and freedom topic. I want to talk about open borders. So we're all persons of faith on this panel. We have compassion for the downtrodden. Jesus commanded us Christians to take care of the least of these. I'm sure Dennis, the Jewish faith, did the same. So while we want to show compassion and we want to save those who have little or have a life of misery, is there a way to do that without opening up the border and letting them all stream in? And if we do that, what kind of damage is that going to do to the fabric of America? Anybody? And we want to start down here with you, Chris.
No, I vote Dennis. Pass. It's
Let's
lightning
take a
round.
vote.
Pass.
I vote Mike.
I second Dennis. Go for Dennis.
It's a conspiracy. I actually wanted to say some other things, but so you're talking about open borders. Is that because not every word was clear because of the back of the speaker? So and about compassion to the alien and so on. Yeah. So interestingly, the most frequent there were 613 laws in the Torah. The Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, first 5 books of the Bible. Everything is based on the first 5 books, both old and new. Love your neighbor is from there. Love God is from there. The Genesis is from there. Creation, Garden of Eden, it's all there. And everything else is, I say, based on it in both Testaments. No Torah, no Judaism, no Christianity. Jesus cited the Torah more frequently than anything else for understandable reasons. So in that 613 laws, one of the only ones that is repeated, I think it's mentioned 3 times at least, is love the stranger. But the actual definition in Hebrew, the word is actually not stranger, it's resident alien. And in other words, the person who is not a Jew, but who lives among you, and this is critical, obeys all of your laws. That person should be loved, because God doesn't know ethnicity. God doesn't divide the world between Jew and non-Jew in the Torah. He divides it between good people and bad people. The heroes of the Torah are at least as frequently non-Jews. The daughter of Pharaoh was not a Jew. She saved Moses. Jethro was a Midianite priest. He was the greatest advisor to Moses. Noah was not a Jew. People forget this, and it's one of the reasons I love the Torah, and I'm writing my commentary on those 5 books. The notion that you have no borders has no basis in common sense, and therefore not in the Bible. That's why my commentary is called the Rational Bible, because I believe reason and the Bible are coextensive. You don't have to violate reason to be a religious human being. The people who violate reason are the secular. Only secular people say men give birth. Just remember that. I don't know a religious Jew or Christian who says that men give birth. The only people who say that are not religious. Now, there are not religious people who don't say it, but everyone who says it is not. You become an idiot, ultimately, when you abandon the Bible, because you have no basis of wisdom. What are you going to use? I mean, there are great books, Dostoevsky and Shakespeare, they're all great. But by the way, they were Bible-based, just for the record. So the notion that a society could survive if it has no borders is as bizarre as men menstruate, just for the record. I just want to quickly add I want to add two quick things before and let everybody else finish up. You mentioned PragerU, and there's a massive onslaught, as you probably know, against PragerU, massive. You have every single major paper in the country and in England has written massive tomes against PragerU because of Florida, Texas, and Oklahoma. Why do they hate us? We have 5-minute videos. They're just wholesome videos. Loving your parents, how to lead a better life, how to be a kinder person, why you should love America. I mean, it's just wholesome stuff. And I always think they have these kids the whole semester. They have them for a whole year, and they're afraid of a 5-minute video. And you know why? For the same reason they're afraid of a conservative speaker for 90 minutes on a campus. Because they know deep down we can undo everything they lie about in 5 minutes or 90 minutes. One more quick point about religion. You saw, were you moved by the number of hands, distressed by the number of hands that went up? Yeah. It's very painful to me, a child not speaking to a parent. Grown men call my radio show on the Happiness Hour when I raise this issue and cry. I can't tell you, I have the chills as I speak to you. It's so painful to hear a parent whose child won't speak to them. And I just want to say one thing. I am certain that in many religious homes, there's tension between a parent and a child, as well as secular homes. But this I do believe, that in a religious home, even if there's such a tension, the child is much less likely to do that to a parent.
That's right.
Because there is something you learn if you're a Jew or a Christian and you take the Bible seriously. God himself said, honor your father and mother. And there's no asterisk unless they voted wrong.
By the way, Phil, Dennis is remarkably humble and gracious about the success of PragerU. I can tell you and I'm a Floridian, Phil's a Floridian, we both reside in that state, and we know the way Florida has embraced PragerU. And Dennis alluded, because you mentioned Oklahoma, but it's actually Florida, Oklahoma, and Texas, daring to say, let's have some goodness that will be exposed to our kids called PragerU. And Dennis is so right. There has been so much good accomplished and so many young hearts and minds that have been changed because of this powerful tool called PragerU. And I want you to know what a joy it is to get to work alongside this guy. Dennis and I are going to take another group of listeners to the Holy Land, October 25th, the Stand With Israel tour. And 500 of us are going to go. You have not lived until you've listened to Dennis talk about the miracle on the Galilee on a wooden boat that's a replica of the boats that Jesus sailed in. There's nothing like
or
it.
Swum with him in the Red Sea.
Correct. We float.
In the Dead Sea. Dead Sea. Dead Sea. Yes, Red Sea is a different story.
But I hope you understand the joy that it should give all of us to know what Dennis Prager has done for the country, for our youth, for young people. There's nothing like him. He's one of a kind.
By the way, is there still room on that tour
We have two or three more weeks left, so
Okay,
it's not
we've got
too late.
500 people coming, right?
We have about 500, but there's room for more. StandWithIsraelTour.com.
How can they go there? I mean, is it your website or Dennis's website?
Stand with Israel Tour, both of our websites, but if you go to StandWithIsraelTour.com, there's still information. I know we met a number of people tonight who've been with us on the trip before. There's nothing like it changes your life to go to the Holy Land, and it's going to be a joy to go again. Say a little prayer for all of us who'll be going over there, and maybe some of you can join us.
By the way, one person in the room tonight did go with us on a previous trip. Her name is Malka. Malka, would you stand up?
Malka.
Malka. Wave. Give her a round of applause.
Malka means queen in Hebrew.
Is
and
it?
she is a queen.
And they tell me that her father and grandfather actually helped form that beautiful country. So thank you, Malka, for that. Did you want to add something, Dr. Jeffress, that I forgot?
You know, one quick thing. Dennis and Moses wrote the book of Deuteronomy. Wait. So you know it well what you wrote in chapter 6. Well, remember the greatest commandment in chapter 6, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But then, God says, then you shall teach your children diligently the law of God. You can't impart something to your children that you don't have in your own heart. There's going to be alienation in families like we saw tonight. But if I'm separated from my kids, I want them to separate from me because of spiritual values, not because of political values. And there is a difference. And I've got a daughter who loves Donald Trump, and I've got a daughter, well, that's just not her cup of tea. But we have a wonderful relationship because she knows that the most important thing to me is not Donald Trump or any other candidate. It's loving God with all of your heart. So I would just say the best way to prevent alienation is to be sure you're passing on the non-essentials or the essential values and leave the non-essentials to matters of personal preference.
That's great advice, Dr. Jeffress. Thank you. Well, we're running out of time, but before we go, I wanted to give you a shameless plug. So one of the teams that works for me called NNPA creates the daily show prep service that we send to all of our hosts to help them understand the top 10 issues going on in that given day. And you can actually sign up for that show prep service. It is called Daybreak Insider. It's available at daybreakinsider.com. It is free. So imagine getting the same show prep material these hosts are getting as an insider. And these are the stories the mainstream media just will not cover. Here's one of the items, by the way, that was in this morning's show prep service. And if anybody wants to comment on this, you may. California to create Transgender History Month in August. Didn't we just have Pride Month in June? The state of California will recognize August as Transgender History Month going forward, becoming the first state to do so. The California State Assembly voted and passed the resolution this week. We have one day to celebrate Christ's birthday, one to celebrate moms, one for dads, one for soldiers who gave their lives for our country. But now we have 180 recognized days of the year to celebrate or honor LGBTQIA plus people. That's almost half the year they get to call themselves underrepresented. Can everyone admit that this is absolutely insane?
Well, two things. Number one, I'm not sure why you just told them about our prep. Why do they need us anymore, Phil? But two, this is something I actually wanted to direct to Dr. Jeffress because this is something that my pastor says often, and I think that it's so critical that we at least understand this. If your spiritual leader cannot say with authority, God doesn't make mistakes, and I'm sorry, there are an awful lot of spiritual leaders in this country that can't say it. God does not make mistakes. God created man and God created woman, and let's never, ever muddy that or even entertain it from the pulpit. And if your spiritual leader is, run fast from that house of worship. Dr. Jeffress?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Tim.
Just one quick thought I love what everybody's been saying. One thing in my heart and mind about all of these matters, as I think about all the different storylines, is loving God and loving my neighbor are the two things that I know that are most important, I believe, according to God's word. And I can do those all the time, no matter what's happening in the world. So I think it is, and there's only so much bandwidth to be passionate about different causes or different subjects in the news, and we should be, and we should vote. But when you talk, the most common one for me is pro-life, and I vote pro-life, and we do something called preborn on our station every year for getting ultrasounds. But as passionate as I would want to be about those things, I want to encourage you, I'm saying the same thing to myself, the other 364 days a year that I'm not voting, or 300, whatever it is, what am I doing to be pro-life? Look in the mirror and ask yourself, what are you doing? Because that freedom hasn't been taken away. Even the craziness of the world should not be surprising in some ways. If you're not serving God, you're making stuff up as you go. You really are. You've actually defined God out of your picture, so you've got to come up with something else. So even while we fight that fight, which we should, it's not, when Chris was on the show today, just for a few minutes, we were talking, what are we going to talk about tonight? He says, I hope people leave with a feeling of hope. And I was like, I'm so glad you said that. Because while we get angry or frustrated, hopefully we are known for people who love God and love each other. Even when Jesus says, love your enemies, think about that. What does that look like? And so you have the power to do that. When you leave here, the guy who cuts you off in traffic, you can either tell him he's number one, or you can let him in. Or you see someone's coming, you slow down, let the guy in. Maybe you take the edge off of that person's day. And I'm not talking random acts of kindness. You have 50, 100 people every day you come across maybe. Only you will come across that person, not me. So this room has got hundreds of people. Think about the impact you could have, the little tiny decisions, the medium ones, the big ones. You still have that ability until the government says you're not allowed to take an unwed woman into your home because she wants to keep her baby. Be pro-life. Open your home for a couple years. That takes work. Not everybody can do it, but you can do that. I just want to say be excited about that whole concept.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
And that God's not surprised by any of it, by the way, if I could just say, Phil, God is not surprised by any of this. It's not as though there isn't a historical precedent for this. We're not living in an unprecedented time. We are for us, but not biblically. These gentlemen know better than me. So God is not surprised. He's still on the throne, and he's going to be on the throne through all this mess after we're gone.
Yes, indeed. So both Mike and Dennis can be heard on the radio, but also seen on television. Just go to salemnewschannel.com and subscribe, watch them live. Of course, listen to them daily here in Philly on AM 990 The Answer. Listen to Chris Stigall every morning on that same station. Listen to Tim Demoss daily on AM 560 WFIL. And listen to Dr. Robert Jeffress mornings on WFIL, or watch him on TV on TBS. Now, Dennis, you have to leave, so they're going to escort you down, and any other panelists who want to leave can join him, follow him. So somebody going to take Dennis down. The rest of you stay here while we wrap this up.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. You guys have been wonderful. So great.
We have the finest for the finest. These fine gentlemen are going to take you down.
Yeah, how about a hand for Warminster's finest, by the way?
So let me just offer a few final thoughts. Your attendance here tonight means everything to us, but it doesn't end here. Now we need you mobilized, out in your community, talking to your friends, your neighbors, your family, even if they do throw you out of Thanksgiving dinner. We can't win this battle with just a few. We need to mobilize everybody. So keep listening to these stations, watch these hosts on their respective TV shows, and let's win the next election. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming. Oh, wait, before you leave, I want to thank our merchandise tonight table is still open. They're in the back. You can start by stopping by and buying a Philadelphia AM 990 The Answer or WFIL hat and t-shirt. Say hello to my friend Carol Healy back there. Also, please stop by our sponsor tables. Thank you again, our sponsors, The Fuge, Vidian Auto Group, Chapman Windows and Doors, Williamsburg Dental, and thanks panelists. Thanks Lorenzo Caldera, thanks Heather Eichelberger, thank you AM 990 The Answer and AM 560 WFIL. Keep listening and support AM radio.